Welcome to this explainer on the origins of smoking. You know, whenever we think about the history of smoking, our minds almost automatically jump straight to modern cigarettes or maybe colonial trade routes. But what if we've been looking at it completely backwards?
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to picture something with me. You're standing around a campfire. It's 50,000 BC, the sun just went down, there's no Netflix, there are zero smartphones, and absolutely no existential dread about your email inbox. It's literally just you, the dancing flames, and this thick, choking smoke curling directly into your face. Somewhere along the line, one of our ancient ancestors looked at that smoke, took a deep breath, and thought, wait, what if I did that on purpose? The desire to inhale smoke definitely doesn't start with commercial tobacco. It might actually be hardwired into us on a level so deep that it predates human civilization entirely.
To really understand how deeply ingrained this behavior is, we have to map out this staggering chronological gap between our first exposure to fire and, well, everything else. The absolute oldest confirmed evidence of controlled fire use by our ancestors dates back roughly 1 million years to the Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. That was Homo erectus. They sat around fires in the dark, they stayed warm, and they breathed in wood smoke literally every single day. For hundreds of thousands of years, smoke was basically our original air quality situation. Fast forward to 12,000 years ago, and we see the first evidence of wild tobacco in a human hearth. Then, zooming all the way to 1492, Columbus first observes tobacco use. When you consider the sheer distance between mastering fire and modern recorded history, it hits you. Our lungs and our brains have been interacting with smoke for an incredibly long time.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the biology behind what happened around those early fires. It's absolutely fascinating. When you burn organic matter, you don't just get carbon dioxide, right? Some plants, when they combust, release psychoactive chemicals. Researchers actually propose that early humans living in forested environments were regularly exposed to the smoke of psychoactive plants like wild cannabis or various entheogens that were just naturally growing around them. And here's the kicker. Our brains were already perfectly hardwired to receive it. We all have an endocannabinoid system. It's a biological system that regulates mood, memory, and appetite. So because these receptors already existed, when a human first inhaled smoke from a burning cannabis plant, their brain wasn't confused at all. The brain essentially said, "Oh, hello, I've been waiting for you." This accidental prehistoric inhalation was likely repeated enough times that someone, eventually, decided to recreate it entirely on purpose.
Now, you might be asking yourself, well, if this has been going on for so long, why don't we have artifacts proving it from 1 million years ago? And it basically comes down to an archaeological mystery. When we dig up human history, we find stone tools from 3 million years ago simply because stone is virtually indestructible. But organic materials? Think seeds, leaves, plant fibers, or maybe a wooden pipe filled with dried herbs. Under normal burial conditions, those just rot away in a few centuries. A leather pouch of cannabis dissolves right back into the earth way before any archaeologist can ever find it. So we really have to remember this golden rule. The absence of evidence is absolutely not the evidence of absence.
And this brings us to what historians like to call the Herodotus problem. So Herodotus was an ancient Greek historian writing way back in the 5th century BC. He wrote about this nomadic group of people from the Eurasian steppe called the Scythians. He described them setting up these small enclosed tents, heating stones until they practically glowed, and then throwing hemp seeds right onto those hot stones. They would sit inside, inhaling the thick smoke, and, these are his exact words, they were howling with pleasure. For centuries, historians just assumed Herodotus was exaggerating, or maybe he just didn't understand what he was looking at.
Well, that is until modern physical excavations finally backed him up. Archaeologists started digging into Scythian burial mounds, and what do you know? They found exactly what Herodotus described. We're talking bronze braziers, superheated stones, and actual hemp residue. The man wasn't embellishing at all, he was literally just reporting the facts. Furthermore, in the Pamir Mountains of Central Asia, dating back to around 500 BC, excavators found wooden braziers in a ritual burial context. And the wild part? They contained cannabis residue with an unusually high THC content. This wasn't just wild hemp used for making ropes, you guys. This was deliberately cultivated for its psychoactive effects. This physical evidence proves that, a solid 2,500 years ago, intentional inhalation was already this highly cultivated, deeply established ritual.
But wait, the story goes back much, much further than the ancient Greeks or the Scythians. In fact, we can trace it back a staggering 12,000 years. Back in 2019, researchers made this massive discovery in the Great Salt Lake Desert over in Utah. They uncovered a human hearth, like a cooking and heating fire, dating back 12,000 years. Inside it, they found concentrated seeds of a wild tobacco species native to North America. And these seeds didn't just blow into the fire by accident. Their high concentration suggests deliberate placement. This predates any known pottery or pipe artifacts by thousands of years. It pushes the timeline of tobacco use way, way back, proving that early hunter-gatherers were already actively interacting with psychoactive plants.
So the crucial point is, why? Why do humans everywhere, completely independently of one another, seek this out? Well, let me introduce you to a theory that's taken very seriously by anthropologists, the intoxication hypothesis. Proposed in the 1980s by psychopharmacologist Ronald Siegel, this theory argues that the human pursuit of altered consciousness isn't some accident or a weird cultural anomaly, it's actually a biological fourth drive, embedded right alongside our fundamental, inescapable needs for hunger, thirst, and sex. Across virtually every human culture we've ever documented, people have sought out ways to alter their mental states, whether that's through fermented drinks, mushrooms, or inhaled smoke. It's basically a biological imperative.
And just to prove that this intoxication drive isn't exclusively a human thing, let's take a quick look at the animal kingdom. Elephants, for example, will deliberately seek out fermented fruit. And up in Siberia, reindeer have been observed eating highly psychoactive amanita mushrooms. Now here is the slightly gross but honestly fascinating part. Other reindeer will then deliberately drink the urine of the reindeer who ate the mushrooms, because those psychoactive compounds actually pass through the body intact. They are essentially doing drug recycling in the middle of the frozen tundra. I mean, if this drive to alter consciousness is deep enough to make a reindeer drink urine, it's entirely reasonable to see why early humans were intentionally experimenting with smoke long before they even had agriculture.
But it wasn't all just about intoxication. Long before smoking was recreational, it was heavily utilized as a legitimate, highly sophisticated medical delivery system. Check this out. In 1550 BC, the Egyptian Ebers Papyrus detailed treatments involving inhaling smoke from heated herbs, specifically for throat and lung conditions. Over in ancient Greece, Hippocrates, the literal father of modern medicine, prescribed therapeutic herbal vapors for lung diseases. And in India, over 3,000 years ago, Ayurvedic medicine utilized something called dhumapana, which translates to smoke drinking. They inhaled specific medicinal herbs through pipes using these incredibly detailed protocols. Think about it. Our lungs are an incredibly fast delivery mechanism. We still use this exact logic today with asthma inhalers and nebulizers. The ancient world just relied on combustion to get the medicine where it needed to go.
Beyond biology and medicine, there's also a vital survival element going on here. Humans are deeply social animals. For most of our evolutionary history, isolated individuals died while groups survived. The ritual smoke circle actually acted as ancient social infrastructure. When a group of early humans sat in an enclosed space, breathing in psychoactive smoke together, they entered a shared altered state. Modern neuroscience actually confirms this. Shared rituals and synchronized neural activity dramatically increase trust and deepen group identity. So this wasn't just some casual gathering. It was a critical social technology. It built the extreme group cohesion that was absolutely necessary to face a dangerous prehistoric world and, ultimately, survive.
Let's move forward and see how this builds as we cross over to the Americas, where we really see how this ancient practice evolved. Tobacco, which is a plant native to the Americas, was completely unknown to the Old World. In 1492, when Christopher Columbus arrived in the Caribbean, he encountered indigenous people engaging in this practice. He wrote in his journal about seeing men and women walking around with small glowing sticks, inhaling the smoke from burning dried leaves and then blowing it back out their noses and mouths. His crew was completely baffled. But it's worth noting that within just a few weeks, they were trying it themselves. Now, to the indigenous peoples, this was absolutely not a casual habit. It was deeply sacred. Smoke was viewed as a living carrier, a messenger between the living and the divine, used for healing rituals and binding serious agreements.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive historical shift between ancient, sacred traditions and modern commercialization. As tobacco spread globally through Europe, it morphed completely. On the one hand, you have an ancient shaman, highly disciplined, using smoke as a sacred communal infrastructure and treating the plant with deep, deep respect. On the other hand, by the 1960s, you have the modern tobacco executive. They took this ancient ritual and turned it into a mass-market consumer product. They suppressed cancer evidence, they hired doctors for bogus endorsements, and they literally added chemical compounds just to maximize addiction.
The industry engineered the product to be as physically destructive and financially extractive as possible. Both figures work with smoke for sure, but their intentions, their methods, and the sheer scale of their impact could not be more radically different.
So what is the grand takeaway from this explainer? Look, while we don't know the exact day the first human decided to inhale smoke intentionally, the behavioral drive is ancient. It predates agriculture, it predates pottery, and it predates every single civilization you've ever read about in a history book. Despite all the technology, the modern medicine, and the endless digital noise of our lives today, there are these thin threads of continuity that run completely unbroken through 100,000 years of human experience. Fire, smoke, and breath. The oldest humans sat around fires in the pitch dark, breathing the exact same smoky air you'd smell at a summer bonfire tonight.
I'll leave you with this final thought. We are deeply, deeply connected to those prehistoric ancestors who first sat downwind of a burning plant, felt something shift in their minds, and decided to pass that discovery down through the generations. So next time you catch a whiff of wood smoke on a cold night, will you remember that you're participating in a sensory experience far older than civilization itself? You are doing exactly what humans have always done. You're breathing. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope you leave with a profound new perspective on such an ancient human habit.